Shalom, brothers and sisters. I hope you're doing fine wherever you are today. As you guys know, this is Eugene Turkey Stories, and I hope that you're fine wherever you are. So today's discussion, we're about to discuss something which I believe it's important. And for the longest time, this is a discourse that we've been trying to disseminate this information to people so that people might be woke, if to say. But we also have a group of people who are working hard, people who are having sleepless nights just to spread the lies to the people. And in this sense, what am I talking about? I'm talking about this because where a person comes from, their lineage, especially in regards to what the Bible alludes to, it's really, really important. Remember, the Bible existed before the present people that you're seeing today were there. And some people uses the Bible to recall what their people used to do, you know. And the Bible has been an instrument which has been used to prove this over time, because even the Bible itself says that the people who wrote the Bible were inspired by God. When that's not important, the question is about the black people. The black people, for the longest time, people have known where they came from. But when it comes to a black person, that's when there's a big confusion. That's when some other people or the enemy working so hard to make sure that the information is not disseminated to the black community, the confusion inside this reality. The question of black Hebrew Israelite. We have a group of people who are getting out there trying to shut people down from believing that this is true, whereas it's included in the Bible. And first, even just before watching this person painfully rebuking that there is no such thing as black Hebrew Israelite, saying that black Hebrew Israelite are white people. And with me, I could just tell you from King James Version, almost 5 verses that proves that we have black people who shows their roots as the black Hebrew Israelite. And this is that's from the King James Version. We have the Deuteronomy, we have Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68, Jeremiah, Lamentations again, Songs of Solomon, Amos, Zephaniah, Isaiah, Acts, Genesis. These are just verses that shows that we have these people. While I don't want to say much, I want us to watch this video and then come back, say something. Because the black community, this is a discussion. Why should we have people that blindfold us to believe that we don't belong, or we are not God's chosen people? Let's dive right into this video and then come back, say something.
We're going to talk today about Hebrew Israelites, and I encourage you to pick up this book if you're interested in the Hebrew Israelite, which we're going to learn about today, the whole movement, and kind of a brief response to it, what it is. We're going to do an overview first, and then we'll get your response and how we should start to address them. So tell me what it is. Like, you already told me that it originated in Harlem, and then it kind of spread. Now it's in the Bible Belt. But tell me what it actually is.
Hebrew Israelism is the ideology, 2 key components to the general ideology. Then I'm going to will it down to my specific area within the larger umbrella of that movement.
Okay.
The 2 key components are people who are thought to be African descendants in the Western Hemisphere are actually the true Israelites spoken of in the Bible. Point 1. Point 2. Lineage of all peoples has important salvific implications. It matters, and you're standing before God who your dad was.
Okay.
That's what that means, the second point.
Okay.
So that's Hebrew Israelism as a broad idea. But then...
So would that exclude, like, someone like me who has no African heritage? Well, not any recent African heritage.
2 things. One is they don't actually think they're African. It's so-called African.
Okay.
So they think there's African peoples who are Hamitic, and they think, these are Hebrew Israelites I'm speaking of, that they are Semitic because they happen to live in Africa as a result of the dispersion of Israel, but they themselves are not Hamitic. They're Semitic. And so they would say so-called African or thought to be African or something like that. And that's why that's why I worded it in a certain kind of way. So it depends. So if we whittle it down and focus on the group I focus on, it's called One West Hebrew Israelism. We can get into why it's called that, but to answer your question fastly, they by and large do exclude someone like you, but not just people of European descent. They would exclude Arabs, who they call Ishmaelites. They would exclude Asians, who they would call Moabites and Ammonites. They would also exclude Indians, who they would call Elamites, as in East Indians. But the type of Hebrew Israelites I deal with would include Hispanic folks and Native Americans as well on their 12 tribes chart, which indicates to them who are the elect ethnicities in God's sight.
So how do they arrive at these beliefs? How did it all happen? Was there just like one guy who started to teach this and other people picked up on it? How did that happen?
The 1880s are the first time we see someone say, hey, so-called African Americans are actually descendants of Jacob. F.S. Cherry, after that, William Crowdy, then it's sort of lost who did what, when, where, why. But by 1919, a very important congregation in Harlem began called the Commandment Keepers. And you can tell, obviously, by the name, got an important and a focus for these folks on keeping Torah as they would see it. Out of that congregation, about 50 years later, 1969, a new school began, which would go through several name changes, but we'll just call them for now the Israelite School of Torah or Tanakh, began by Abba Bivens. These peculiarities I mentioned about identifying certain people groups with certain ancient biblical peoples in the modern era, they make corollaries. Abba Bivens seemed to start most of that, from what we can gather. It's a little unclear with some of these lines because a lot of this is based on oral history. But Abba Bivens began the kind of Hebrew Israelism that I focus on, which is the most militant and mysterious, but also has the most momentum out of all the sects.
Okay, so this is still, I guess, help me connect the dots. So remind me of what the two things are that they believe that sort of separates them. It almost sounds like they just identify as Jews.
Yeah.
Or like the true Jewish people.
Yeah. So
it almost sounds like they're rejecting Christianity, like it's Jesus as the Messiah, and like, and Paul's message about it doesn't, it applies to everyone.
So a few things. Within Hebrew Israelism, there are Tanakh-only Hebrew Israelites who it almost looks like Black Judaism. But that's not the One West type that I focus on, the guys on the street.
Okay.
That kind says we accept the New Testament,
Okay.
we accept Christ, and most of them would say we accept Paul. What they say is the Christian church, which is influenced by Roman Catholic theology, does not properly understand Paul. That's what most of them would say.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that they say that we get wrong or that Christians get wrong about?
Well, okay,
Paul?
This one's going to be hard to stomach because it's really absurd in a way.
Okay.
Whenever Paul or the New Testament in general, so the book of Acts written by Luke, for example, mentions Gentiles in a favorable context, those are not actually ethnic Gentiles. Those are lost Israelites who've been scattered in a Gentile state of mind.
Okay, interesting.
So that way Cornelius...
So then it would only apply to the Black Israelites.
Yes.
Or to the Hebrew Israelites.
Yeah, they generally don't like the term black in front of it. They view it as racist, although that's anachronistic, or it's retconning, I'll say that instead, because in their own history, they used to call themselves Black Israelites. But more and more, they actually view it as racist. So I just say Hebrew Israelites, usually with quotation marks, because it's a contentious phrase or idea. But they add Hispanics and Native Americans. And so, yeah, that way it's only to them. So Cornelius, for example, Acts chapter 10, clearly not an ethnic Israelite by every indication in the text of the Italian band, everything about him. If you read the text, it's obvious to any person reading the text, he's not an Israelite. But because he's also accepted by God and he's shown favor by the God of Israel, they have to turn him into an Israelite. So they just say he was an Israelite. And the way they do that
not
is
by ethnicity or
no,
genetics.
by ethnicity, no, by genetics.
Interesting.
What they do is they go to other, what they call precepts. So they say precept essentially is a proof text for them.
Okay.
So they jump to other places to show salvation is only for Israel. And then by a logical deduction or whatever, well, therefore, Cornelius.
Since this person is accepted or saved,
exactly.
then they have
you
to
got
be.
it. So it's backwards in that way.
Yeah.
And of course, as a quick critique, there is a word for what they're talking about. A scattered Israelite in a so-called Gentile state of mind, although the Bible wouldn't say it that way. It's called a Hellenized Jew. They're spoken of in the situation that arose in the early church where there's a problem with the food distribution amongst the widows. The Hellenized folks, these are Jews who adopted Greek culture and customs, were getting less food than the less Hellenized ones. I'm saying it in a manner of speaking, but you can read about this. So there is a word for what they're saying, but it's not the word. It's not Gentile. It's not the word they use. And so it really makes the Bible unclear, because it's like, okay,
who does it apply to?
How do you determine which one's which? Basically, here's the answer. If the text is favorable to the group being spoken of, those Gentiles are scattered Israelites in a Gentile state of mind. If the text is not favorable, then those are actual Gentiles.
Okay. So what's the point of all of this, though? Like, what are they trying to get at? They're trying to say that some people are saved and some people aren't saved?
Some people are not even candidates for salvation.
Okay.
Based upon ethnicity.
Okay.
And that's just how God set it up. So you kind of said the point. It's like this. If your ancestors were slaves, it sort of doesn't feel very noble to basically have your history start with slavery. And so that's kind of the way things have been portrayed or how they're perceived. This jumps past that and gives people a grand history that is actually in the Bible, which it's sort of an upend, because the Bible for a long time has been the most important book within Western civilization.
Yeah.
And what this ends up doing is saying, hey, you people in Western civilization that have hated us and mistreated us during the transatlantic slave trade, the book you cherish is actually all about us. And so it gives folks really an imaginary community, an imagined history, but the most important thing that it gives adherents is an imagined identity. And identity formation and completion are very important. And so when people look at this and they say, no one should take that serious, you can never discount the power of identity formation and completion. And so the intellectual scaffolding supporting the idea is almost secondary to protect this newfound identity that a person feels they have. That feels better than identifying as a Christian, because Christianity is viewed as sort of a European bastardized version of the real biblical message. So Hebrew Israelism is similar to Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons in that it's a restorationist movement of sorts.
Okay, so I've identified at least two different claims that they're making. The first one is theological. They're talking about the Gentiles are sort of excluded from the pool, or from the possibility of salvation.
Yeah.
But then also there's this empirical claim that the Hebrew Israelites, or this group, whatever, however you want to identify them, are descended from the line of Jacob, right? And that seems like an empirical thing that we could kind of look at ancestry and figure out. So how do you go about addressing those two different claims?
Excellent. So you did hit it on the key points right there. So the theological one, when you look at Scripture, you don't only look to the New Covenant or the New Testament, because there's counterexamples of their theology all throughout the Old Covenant or Old Testament as well. For example, there's a man named Caleb who was with Joshua, one of the only two out of the spies who was able to go into the land. He's a Kenizzite. And later on, he's described being part of Judah because they would sort of put him into a tribe. But my point is, Kenizzites are not part of the tribes of Israel. They're a different nation. You have Uriah the Hittite. And the list could go on and on. It could also go over to the women. Ruth.
Melchizedek also.
Moabite, yeah. So even people before Israel also. So sometimes they'll say to me, so which gate are you going to enter for your salvation? They're referring to the end of the book of Revelation, where it speaks about the 12 tribes of Israel, and there's a gate there and all this. And sometimes they'll say, okay, great question. Which gate is Noah going to enter into? So Noah's before Abraham. He's not part of Israel because there's no Israel yet. Sometimes they'll say, well, he's a proto-Israelite. And this group I'm talking about that I deal with, they believe in reincarnation. So they would believe Noah actually showed up later on anyway.
Wow.
Again, to reiterate, these are the One West type Hebrew Israelites. If someone who's a not One West, which these are the Hebrew Israelites descended out of a certain address, that's where the One West comes from, in Harlem, they might watch this and say, vocab is giving an inaccurate representation of some of my beliefs because I'm not speaking about the fullness of their beliefs. Now, the two main points of Hebrew Israelism I mentioned in the beginning would still apply to them, because even though they think Gentiles can be grafted in, there's still an ethnic hierarchy within their ecclesiastical structure. But I'm focusing again on the One West type of groups. So the second thing.
The empirical question.
Right. They, by and large, discount DNA evidence. Unless it's convenient to their position, they think it's friendly towards it, they usually discount it. So if I ever mention
I mean, it
DNA
sounds just like
evidence,
confirmation bias, just on the face of it.
yeah, sometimes they'll say things like this. Well, most of the big testing companies are owned by Jews, and they're trying to hide the truth from us because they're ethnic and religious imposters.
That's interesting because I thought the ancestry companies were actually owned by the Mormons.
Mormons own a lot of them. They're incorrect. The companies are not all owned by Jews. It's not even accurate.
Okay.
But and sometimes they'll say, well, it's still a new science, and they're figuring out things and all that. Some are a little more crass. They'll say, well, that's white man science. Every now and then you run into a Hebrew Israelite who says, well, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, and look, here's my chart. It is confirmed that I'm Semitic. Sometimes you get those guys. But here's the truth of the matter. The exception proves the rule, and here's what I mean by that. South Africa and Zimbabwe is home to a group of people called the Limba. The Limba, especially within the male priestly clan, have demonstrated not only through their oral history, but by genetic testing, to have DNA that can be traced back to the Levant, meaning Semitic, meaning highly likely their ancestors were Israelites. And interestingly enough, most of them are Christian as far as their religious practice these days. A few things about that. They're not where the transatlantic slave trade happened. You know, that's the West Coast, that's the Ivory Coast. It's a different area of the continent of Africa. So it's irrelevant really to any kind of claim. And it's a small people group within the continent itself. So it's not impossible through the dispersion. You could have people who would display similar phenotypical traits as other Africans to actually have Semitic ancestry. That's not impossible. But the question is, does that equal the equivalency thesis that they have, which is if you came over here on a ship in accordance with Deuteronomy 28:68, then you're actually an Israelite. It doesn't. It doesn't equal that. It's irrelevant to it. But by and large, they discount DNA.
So how much of this do you cover in the book? Do you cover all of the things that we've talked about?
Not
today?
all, but a lot.
Okay. So, well, again, we're going to have to cut this interview short today, but if you want to learn more about the Black Hebrew, yeah, you got it right here, the Black Hebrew
Israelites. I put it
Israelites.
on the title so people know what I'm talking about, but in the book, I call them just Hebrew Israelites. But
Okay.
It's on the title.
If you want to learn more about this and how vocab responds to this, pick up his book. I've got it in the description of the video. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about this before we close out?
To Christians watching this, if you know a Hebrew Israelite, which you're going to meet one. They're not just out on the corners. They're at your job more and more. They're in your family. It's going to, I think within 5 years, it's going to rival and surpass the Nation of Islam as the largest competitor in the city for the Christian church. I think that's almost certain. So you're going to meet them.
So you're saying take it seriously, right?
Yes,
yeah,
yes, I am saying take it seriously, and I'm also saying ask them what they believe. Find out what they believe, because everything I've said, it's highly idiosyncratic. So I'm describing a large swath of it, but I'm not describing everybody. So ask them what they believe. Find out what they believe.
Yeah.
Go with them, but also I would do serious evangelism. What I mean by that is. This thing, what I've seen when someone adopts this identity thesis, because if that's all they adopted, Cameron, it's actually not that big of a deal. It's like, okay, you might be mistaken. It's not the end of the world. But what it does is acts as an anchor to their theology. And all of a sudden you get works-based salvation. All of a sudden you get denigration of the deity of the Christ. All of a sudden you get denial of the Trinity. All of a sudden you get acceptance of the Apocrypha. I'm not saying that's as bad as the others, but all these other things that weigh down the theology and transmorph it into something that I think Galatians directly spoke against.
Wow, that's been really interesting. So, well, thanks for coming on to Capturing Christianity. I'm sure we'll do something in the future, maybe host a debate between you and a Hebrew Israelite. That might be interesting.
That would be very interesting.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, man.
First of all, I find it so painful that these people who are talking against the Bible, they don't have the Bible, or they don't, at least for me, I'm talking and I have this, I can, look at through the app, but we're having some people, these people in specific, they are talking about these issues. They're not even perusing something. And this person who is interviewing the other guy is even not asking me, why is the evidence? Because at some point, what you say, we don't believe from what you say. We just want evidence. That's what we want. And for me, I mean, just like I've introduced the introduction of this video, I've given you like 5 verses from King James Version that shows how Black people are the true Israelites. Leave alone the the black community itself dividing, saying that other black people are not all black people are Israelites. But generally, we are saying black people are the true Hebrew Israelites. Now, listen. Uh, and I'm gonna read you five, at least five. You know, I'm gonna read you at least five. So let's go. We're starting with Deuteronomy 28:68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way thereof I spoke unto thee. Thou shalt see no more again. And therefore ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and for bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Listen, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt. Who are those? Israelites. By using what? By ships, which alludes to the Bible is written figuratively. If you ask a person, the Bible is not sometimes written directly, it's written figuratively. And this alludes to black people who are taken from Africa, taken as slaves. That's it. It's as simple as such. Now, Jeremiah 14:2. Judah mourneth, and the gates thereof languish. They are black unto the ground, and the cry of Jerusalem is gone up. Not enough. We have Lamentations 4:8. Their visage is blacker than a coal. They are not known in the streets. Their skin cleaveth to their bones. It's withered. It's becoming like a stick. That's not enough. We're having Lamentations 5:10. Our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. Songs of Solomon 1:5-6. I'm a black I'm black, but comely. O ye daughters of Jerusalem, and the tents of Kedar, and the curtains of Solomon, look not upon me, because I'm black, because the sun hath looked upon me. My mother's children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but mine own vineyards I have not kept. Amos 9:7. Are ye not as children of the Ethiopians upon me unto me? Now listen closely. Are ye not as children of Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel? Said the Lord. Have you not brought the Israel out of the land of Egypt? And the Philistines from Comforter, and the Syrians from Kir? Zephaniah 3:10. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughters of my dispersed, shall bring my famine. We have called the word Ethiopia 2 times. Why is Ethiopia located in Africa? What kind of people do we find in Africa? Black or white? Answer it for yourself. Isaiah 11:11. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people. We shall be left from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from islands of the sea. Acts 13:1. Now there are we in the church that was Antioch, certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon that was called Niger, and the Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, which had been brought up the Herod, the Tetrarch, and Saul. The last one. There's so many, and so many, and so many. But let me read you the last one. And he said unto Abraham, Know of surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in the land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Listen, it pains me that these people, or this person who is being interviewed, doesn't have any evidence or anything that acts as an evidence. You can't walk into an interview talking about such kind of a topic, a serious topic like that, and you can't bring out something that it's tangible. You can't bring out something that you can call. Folding your hands, forming the Freemason shape, and not saying anything important. Like, for me, that's really crazy. That's really crazy. And I'm so sad that it's painful to see in the comment section how some black people have been convinced, and now they're saying, thank you for this information. I never knew I was in the darkness. You have been just delivered to the darkness. That's what I'll say. The God's chosen people belongs to the 12 tribes of Israel. That's the black people. And even the Bible itself quotes and says it clearly that we have a number of things that alludes to black people. The imagery, the description, and everything. How crazy it is that they deny that Jesus was black. Really, Yeshua was black, and for the longest time they argued that he wasn't, and he ain't, and he never was, you know, arguing at a point of the Bible because that's the reference I can make. But let me tell you what other people are saying. Now, I want us to listen to what some people are saying about this situation in the comment section. But I believe that it's important that we get to hear this. Um, somebody said, huh. Somebody said, I used to be a Hebrew Israelite, and towards the end of my faith, when I finally got the balls to leave it behind, I was told that God wouldn't punish me for turning my back onto the truth and I would end up dead or miserable for the rest of my life. I did suck that I lost a lot of friendship that I valued because of this, but all in everything, I stand out better. I realized that the matters to me, and I'm also realized that I can't make myself believe something or change my mind about something unless there's sufficient evidence. Okay, happy for you, man, that you did what you did, but the truth is out there for people still believe, you know. Somebody says that funny how many different groups have so many different interpretations of one book that was meant to give the gift of love, hope, faith, and forgiveness. Yet so many people want to use it to lord over and hate other people. Jesus gave his life so that we would live again. Somebody just say that that's the difference between black Hebrew Israelite and the true saved born again Christians. The black Hebrew Israelites have the identity in their flesh stroke race, but we brethren have our identity in the Lord Jesus Christ, the body of the Christ, the true church, and we all began to unite together as though in Christ Jesus the Lord. Look, even the Bible itself was written by God. The reason that's why sometimes a person will ask, why is the issue of race important in this situation? Remember, when they say that the issue of race is important, remember there was a time when Jesus was white, the issue was not about race. Now, when people came out, read scriptures, get to know the truth, now they started questioning race. Is race a factor now? The same thing which is applying here. The same thing that these people are also trying to say. Somebody is saying that and this is a black person. That's why I wanted to read this. You can hear how people are brainwashed. Somebody's saying, thanks to Jesus, I am free from the false doctrine that the black Hebrew Israel doctrine movement. I used to be swayed in the movement that, but some way, God made me for me. Quoted some Bible, John 8:36. Therefore, the Son makes you free, shall be free indeed. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free, and it made me free. Thank you guys for hearing my testimony and delivering. Like, there's so messed up information here. And guys, teach your kids, let them know the truth. Teach your kids before they're brainwashed, because this is something which is happening. And I hope that this video finds you well. I couldn't say much, but I was watching the video. From what I've learned for the longest time, from what I know for the longest time, something was did wrong with the person who was being interviewed. I don't know how many accolades he has in religion or something, but definitely I couldn't agree much. I couldn't. I mean, I just couldn't. That was way too much brainwashing, and he was working so hard to make sure that you are brainwashed. Was working so hard to make sure that you believe what they were saying. Give us the Bible. Um, give us the proof. What are you talking about? You know, you can't just come bare-handed and saying things, saying words, and you want us to believe. It can't. It can never. It has never. So, guys, I hope this video finds you well. You can tell me what you think about this video in the comment section. I know it's not going to be easy, but let's discuss. Let's have a discuss. What do you think? Either you're a white person or a black person. What can you say about this video? Is it right? Is it wrong? And I'm gonna also share the name of the channel from this person so that you can get to see the video. If you agree with them, well, that's good. But I feel like the person who was being interviewed could have done more research, or maybe he believes in what he believes, because today people believe in everything that they do believe in. So let's meet in my next video. I hope this video finds you well wherever you are. Until then, peace, love, and harmony. Salute.